Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad, episode number 217. Colin Kaepernick, You Divide Us. I wanted to talk to you today about what did Colin Kaepernick try to accomplish the other day when he essentially said you can't have the Betsy Ross flag, the initial flag of the United States of America on a sneaker, a Nike sneaker, and then Nike capitulated and said they're not going to do it. What did he accomplish? What he accomplished is dividing people. Now, I don't think that's what he wanted to accomplish, but that's the only thing that could possibly flow from it. And here's the backstory on this one. I'm an American, you're an American, everybody's an American that lives in this country, and we're supposed to be united and we're supposed to love our country. That's the way it's supposed to be. Even if there are injustices in our nation, because there are always injustices in every nation. I certainly know, I know that some people have bigger grievances than other grievances. And on today's landscape, slavery is not one of them. I'm going to tell a little story about my family. My great-grandfather, Joseph Zenner, he grew up in Austria in the Tyrolean Mountains, poor part of Austria, and he was sold when he was 12 years old in the late 1800s to a farm family so he could work on the farm until he was 18. He was essentially an indentured servant for 6 years. The family sold him because they couldn't really afford to pay him or feed him, and so they'd help out a richer family. So essentially, Joseph Zenner was a slave for 6 years, and who knows if he was treated well or not. I actually never got to meet the man, but that was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so when he got freed from his indentured servitude at the age of 18, he left for America and came here in the early 1900s through Ellis Island. In fact, my entire family came here through Ellis Island. And so therefore, is my blood lineage, not that it even matters, does it have anything to do with the slave trade? Under no circumstance, because we were peasants from Europe, and peasants didn't participate in the slave trade, except that in Europe we were actually indentured servants. And so I have a really hard time believing that I'm in a different boat than somebody whose family came who was under the slavery until the 1860s here, but now they're as free as I am because they actually are. And so can't we forget our pasts in some small way? Should I still be mad and angry that my grandpa Joseph Zenner was actually a slave within Europe? No, I shouldn't be, because that has really no bearing on my country now. It has no bearing on my life now. In fact, he came to our country to be free and to be prosperous, and that's what he did. Well, so how does our country stop people from doing that today in terms of, slavery? It does not, because slavery doesn't exist. And might I point out to Colin Kaepernick that it was the very principles of the foundation of the Betsy Ross flag, that all men are created equal and they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that these are the very same principles, by the way, that led to the abolition of slavery, the very same principles that led to Colin Kaepernick's family, his lineage, being free. And so why would you be protesting the flag that brought freedom to the slaves when the slave trade pre-existed America by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years? You shouldn't be. I mean, it was the principles of our founding nation that actually ended slavery. So you should be celebrating your country, how it was able to overcome such a moral blight on a people. Maybe I would think differently if I were African American, but I wouldn't. And I'll tell you something, by the way. What Colin Kaepernick did was he put a divide in the heart within Americans and made people choose sides on this issue, which you shouldn't have to choose sides on whether you love your country or not. I mean, I love my country, and my lineage doesn't go back to Betsy Ross flag. I wasn't even here; nobody was, and I still love my country, and I love the founding principles, and I love the founding documents, and I love the founding fathers, and by the way, I love the civil rights movement, and I love, the abolition of slavery, and I love women's suffrage, and I love every little moral progression we've made in this country. I love it, and it's because of the founding principles of our nation. And so if you like the way that we've moved in terms of human rights, civil rights, women's rights, abolition of slavery, if you like that, then you should love the Betsy Ross flag. But here's the deal. So you get a whole bunch of angry people that want to hate America because slavery existed. Well, I love America because a whole bunch of people of my race, by the way, gave their sons in battle and died freeing the sons of another race, which this is the only place on the planet that's actually happened. If you want to gripe about slavery, if you want to gripe about like the history of the horrors of slavery, go to Africa right now, because it's still actually it's still legal in Africa. Like slavery, the slave trade actually still exists. Well, by the way, maybe you should gripe about the people that sold the Africans into slavery. I mean, these are Africans themselves selling their brothers and sisters to slave traders. And so I don't know where your gripe should be, but it shouldn't be with Betsy Ross. It shouldn't be with the United States of America, where a whole race of people stepped up and gave their lives, literally gave their lives and their honor and their dignity to free the sons of another race. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of the world except here in America because of the founding principles. And, he brought this Frederick Douglass into this conversation, and he shouldn't have done that unless he read history. Frederick Douglass was a great author, a great writer, and he actually bought his way out of slavery. And if you've spent time reading his work, he was a very optimistic man in terms of America. He was a very optimistic man in terms of the principles of freedom and liberty. And he was one of the great workers to help change the mindset of America and lead to the freedom for the slaves. And there was a guy named John Brown. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was the guy that attacked the Union troops at Harper's Ferry. Essentially, he was a father of 12 children, and he went into battle almost single-handedly to try to teach the North a lesson. And he was an abolitionist. He was a diehard abolitionist. He was a white man, by the way, that he was going to give his life to free the black man. And that's how much of an abolition John Brown was. Why don't we talk about him in the Betsy Ross flag? Because he flowed from that as well. I mean, if you want to divide people, just pick and choose who you want to pick. You can pick the haters and say, oh, America's a hater. What about John Brown? And Frederick Douglass had this to say about John Brown. Frederick Douglass said, my love of freeing the slaves burns as hot as a candle. John Brown's love of freeing the slaves burns as hot as the sun. And so there you go. If you want to quote Frederick Douglass, talk about his love of the abolitionists. Talk about his love of the principles of freedom and liberty. Don't talk about the topics that divide Americans based upon some arbitrary point in time. Yeah, I mean, you can't look at history with these rose-colored glasses and make judgments of how history played out. I mean, St. Augustine, one of the greatest theologians of all time, said slavery and politics are necessary due to the fallen nature of man. He was writing that in the 4th century. So he could not foresee a future without slavery. And so Colin Kaepernick now can. Like, he could say, oh, they made all these mistakes, but the greatest theologian of all time, the man who actually compiled the Bible, in the 4th century, he's going to overthink him? Yeah. No, don't do that. That's haughty, it's hypocritical, and it comes from the devil, because what it does is, like, I'll tell you what I think about blacks in this country. They're my brothers and sisters. They will, and I give my life for them. I really would. And I hope they would do the same for me, and I think they probably would. I mean, they're some of the most joyous, wonderful people on the planet. And for you to say, divide a line in the sand saying, you can only be with us if you say the history of your nation sucks. That's what you did, Colin Kaepernick, and I'm not willing to do that. And I'll tell you what, a whole bunch of people aren't willing to do that. The only people that are willing to do that are people that are angry, mad, and not hopeful for the future, which would be you. And so you got to just pray about it, man. You can't be all angry and mad and trying to divide people, because I'll tell you, when black babies and black and white babies and whatever else come together, and they actually form families together and communities together, and they fall in love with each other and whatever else, and fall in love with each other in every sense of the word, community sense, family life, you name it. That's how we get over this. We don't get over this by saying, something that your country did is so bad that now you have to walk away from your country. Give me a break. This is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe. Don't fall into the temptation of hating your fellow man based upon history, because you could actually, if you were a little bit optimistic and a little bit thoughtful, you could actually fall in love with your fellow man because of history. Think about John Brown on that one. Catholic Dad making you think about it. Like or subscribe. Get the Mass, pray the Daily Rosary. God bless.